If you clicked on this episode, then you probably know you want to start something, you just don't know exactly what. And let me tell you why you need to listen to me. See, I made my first R1,000,000 in sales in just 4 months. And in just 22 months, I have built my business into literally a powerhouse that employs over 24 people. We have made literally, I don't even know how much in revenue at this point, and we sell out in literally every single thing that we drop. And worst of all, we are in a very situated industry, which is fashion. So it's pretty clear that I came up with a pretty good business idea. And the truth is that mine is not unique or special. It just has a few very key principles. In this episode, I'm going to share with you a 4-step framework that you can apply in order to come up with your $1,000,000 business idea. So without wasting any time, let's get right into it. This is actually episode 2 of a 3-part series that I have labeled the Steward of Influence path. And what I'm trying to teach you here is that it's not necessarily about building an amazing business, but rather becoming a person who actually can create an amazing business idea. Because like I explained in the first episode, people buy into other people. And unfortunately, if you don't understand what a steward of influence is, if you don't actually go through the stage of becoming a key person of influence, then this part might not be as valuable. I strongly advise that before you continue with this episode, go back and watch part 1. It's linked down in the description. So going forward, I'm just going to assume you know exactly what a steward of influence is, and you know exactly what you need to do in order to become a steward of influence. Because steward of influence are the people that build amazing, profitable business that sell out every single time. Now, in the Steward of Influence framework is actually in 3 parts, right? First, you embody, then you express, and then lastly, you establish. And we are at this last part of the framework, which is the establishing part, right? You've gone through this first 2 stages, right? And you've now gotten to a point where you have an audience and you're trying to establish now a business. Let's start with number 1, right? First, think about what you already have, right? Now, we have a tendency of undermining some of the advantages that we already have, some of the unfair advantage and talents that we already have. I always discourage using the word talent because I think when people hear the word talent, they get intimidated and they start to be like, okay, I don't know if I have a talent, because to them it sounds like something that needs to be extraordinary and different and unique, but that's not the case, right? Your unfair advantage can literally be just either your network, it can be something that you studied already, it can be an industry where you're already working, it literally can even be something that you have really, really deep interest and love for, right? And it doesn't have to be a passion, it doesn't have to be groundbreaking, it just has to be something that comes a little easier to you than it does to other people, right? Now, I'm going to use myself as a framework here and say that for me, what I had to get to a point where I built my business, Storthema, is that I had the love for modesty, right? And I also had this knowledge that I acquired for head wraps, right? I had this knowledge and skill that I guess I acquired for head wraps. Now, this is something for me at the time, especially, that I felt like was nothing. I didn't think anything would come out of it. For me, head wraps were just head wraps, but I could see that people were interested in it. People would ask questions about it. Some people found value in it, right? So this is just to say to you that do not look down on that thing. It's never anything big. It's never anything significant. It's always something that you're probably looking down on. Just think to yourself, what is it that people always come to you for? What is it that people always compliment you for? Now, what is it you already love or maybe even just excited about? If you cannot figure it out yourself, ask questions. Literally try to uncover what you have. I actually did an entire episode diving deep into this topic of finding your unfair advantage on our Abundance podcast. It will be down in the description, so be sure to check it out. Once you've sort of like come up with like maybe a short list of 1 or 2 things that you feel like you have an unfair advantage in, I would say go on now and actually think of a customer, right? Think of a who. Now, I know this seems a little out of order because it's like, okay, like first you said I must find an unfair advantage. I'm sure what the mistake that a lot of people have is that they go from, okay, figuring out what they think they're kind of good at, and they jump straight into now finding a product. And they jump straight into developing a product and coming up with a business idea, and then bam, they try to sell. And that is wrong. That is how you end up with a whole bunch of stock that nobody wants to buy. That's where you end up over investing in the wrong business because you have not built it for anybody specific, right? So before you even figure out what the product is, before you start brainstorming ideas of what it is that you're going to sell or what it is that like you think you can offer to people, I would say immediately first think about the who, right? Who exactly are you selling to? You do this through creating an avatar, right? Something that is called a customer avatar. Now, what a customer avatar is, it's almost like a person that you create. Now, for Tolthema, for me, my customer avatar was Ruby. Ruby is 35 years old. She's married. She's Christian. She's modest. She's high earning, right? Ruby is a person. Ruby has a name. She even has an attitude. She has a character, right? This is so crucial, right? Because now that I have in my mind an idea of who I could potentially be selling to, right? It makes it so much easier to come up with the correct product, right? And you're probably asking yourself, I don't know exactly what I'm selling, so how do I know who I'm selling it to, right? This goes back again to looking at what you already have. Who are you already exposed to? Who do you already understand? And I think the simplest hack to go about this, sometimes the easiest thing would be to sell to yourself. Sell to either your past self or your future self, because think of yourself as a reference. Create a customer avatar that you can relate to, that you can understand, right? But I wouldn't say yourself exactly, because probably maybe you can't afford yourself, right? Because with myself, I couldn't sell to myself exactly because at the time I was a student, right? I didn't have any money, and I didn't want my customer to be somebody who didn't have money. So yes, Ruby is someone who I can relate to in the sense that she's a modest woman, she's Christian, right? Ruby is almost like my future self, right? She is who I envision myself to be in the future. Someone who's high earning, someone who's married, someone who's like, hey, a woman of substance, So you think of that yourself. Like you could possibly sell to yourself, maybe not your current self, maybe your future self. You can even sell to your past self. And by selling to your past self, you can think of what is a problem that you have solved for yourself. For example, I, at the time, was wearing hijabs because I didn't have a hairline and I couldn't afford to do my hair all the time. So I can say that I was selling hijabs, I guess, to my past self, to somebody who didn't have the understanding on the knowing of knowledge, someone who had the same problem as I have. Maybe they also don't have money to fix their hair. Maybe they also don't have a hairline and they want to cover up but still look amazing, right? So think of it that way. What is it? Who can you relate to? What can you actually sell to yourself? And is it you right now? Or is it you maybe how you see yourself in the future, or maybe something that you have solved in the past, right? Once you've done this, right, it's so crucial that you then zoom in to the who, right, and figure out their need, right? And with their need here, it's very important for you to understand that it's broken down into two things. It is their emotional and functional need. See, now that you have a customer in your mind, there's Ruby, right? You need to now ask yourself, what is it that this person actually needs, right? What does this person need? And with need, understand that there's an emotional need and then there's also a functional need. By functional need, I mean like the practical thing that you could possibly solve, the possible thing that you could possibly offer to the person, right? And in my case, right, the functional need that I was probably helping Ruby with was the fact that, my hijab were very stretchy. And because I obviously knew who my talent was, right, I could sort of like predict her problems or understand her problems because I had people around me who I could ask. I had people around me who were already talking and telling me the issues that they were facing regarding hijabs, right? So people were saying that, they love hijabs, but they can't tie hijabs, right? And people were also saying that, oh, they love hijabs, but hijabs gives them a headache, right? So literally, I knew that whatever it is that I had produced, I had to now come up with a hijab that wasn't just any kind of hijab, but a hijab that fitted or solved this functional need. So I made sure that my hijabs were super stretchy, right? So that they were comfortable and wouldn't give Ruby a headache. And I also had to make sure that my hijabs were good quality and they looked beautiful. They were easy to tie, right? Because Ruby already said she does not know how to tie a hijab, which is why I came up with turbans, instant turbans that she could easily just slip on. So there was a very functional and real need that I was solving with the hijabs, right? And then when it comes to emotion, right, it goes back to this thing of people buy into other people, which is where the concept of a steward of influence comes in, right? Trust me, at the time when I started Dolthema, there were quite a number of people who were selling hijabs online. So it wasn't anything revolutionary. It wasn't anything different. It wasn't anything new, right? What I had to then do is that I needed to convince Ruby to buy from me. And to convince Ruby to buy from me, I had to then become the face of my brand, right? Not even the face, but I had to give my brand a face and a voice and a message, right? This is when now I crafted this messaging that, listen, a hijab is not a hijab, but a hijab is a crown, right? And I was constantly showing up as the face of my business all of the time, to the point where people used to call me the lady with the dukes, because literally when they saw my face walking down the street, it was like, oh my God, oh, Dolthema, this is so matubu. Because they have now associated me with the product. Now, the product is not just a product in itself in the air. It's very easy to forget Amatubu that you saw on TikTok, but it's very difficult to forget now this very familiar face of this person who now represents Amatubu. Do you understand? Like the fact that I became a steward of influence, I became someone who embodied hijabs, right? And I became someone who was sharing content about hijabs, right? And I became someone who then established a business about hijabs, right? It was so easy for people to now have the emotional need or desire to want to buy from me, right? And with the emotion, you need to have sort of like a story or a message, a meaning, right? With emotional needs, you have to understand that people feel the need to fit in. People feel the emotional need to feel confident. People have the emotional need to feel secure. They have the emotional need to feel maybe even loved, right? Think about who your customer is, right? And think about what is a functional need that you can serve. And then think, what emotional need can you pair with that functional need? So back to the framework of myself and what I did with the hijabs is that I had these amazing hijabs with these amazing functional features, that they were stretchy, they were comfortable, they were beautiful, they were easy to wear, right? And then I paired that with, first of all, a steward of influence, that is me, right? Someone that people already trusted and they knew, because I was already sharing content about modesty and about fashion, and then I paired that with sort of like a messaging and a branding around confidence, right? Dolthema does not sell hijabs, it sells confidence, right? So what we actually are is that we are satisfying this emotional need of confidence, right? We want women to feel proud, to feel elegant, to feel beautiful. And that is what we offer them through our products. So you now have to think, the only reason why I was able to come up with this is because I understood who I was selling to. I was selling to Ruby. I thought, okay, so a woman in around like her mid-30s, like what are her priorities? What is she interested in? Like, who does she want to be? And I feel like a woman at that stage, she's very much in her, becoming of self. She's sort of already figured out who she is in the world, and she's settled. She knows herself. She's sure of herself. She exudes confidence, and she just relates so much to this idea of, elegance and sophistication, right? This would have been a completely different case if maybe my target market was like a Gen Z who's in university, right? Maybe instead of confidence for her, maybe I would have been selling the feeling of fitting in. Who knows? But like essentially what I'm trying to get you to think of here is that you will not find the right functional and emotional need if you haven't first figured out and clearly identified who exactly you are selling to, right? Now, once you've taken the time to actually think about this and jot them some notes and you have some ideas, you are now ready for the fourth and the last step, which is to actually now list ideas, right? I am going to say go on and make a list. Force yourself to make a list of 10, right? And then narrow it down to your top 3 that you're actually going to begin to test. Why I'm saying 10 is that 10 takes off the pressure, right? I think when someone is trying to think about the perfect, great business idea to go for, like it's almost like you start to overthink it and there's a lot of pressure and you overthink it a lot. And when you overthink something, you're probably not going to come up with the best of ideas. And you're probably also going to ignore a lot of other things that are probably really good that you just never actually considered, right? So what I will say, make a list of 10. I did this before I literally landed on Dolphin. I made a list of 10 business ideas, right? And just literally put it out there. Think of it like, consider what is it that you already have an unfair advantage in. And you might have an unfair advantage in multiple things. Make sure that each of the 10 business ideas that you list down are taking into consideration these 3 aspects that we've already discussed here. They each need to relate to something that you already have an unfair advantage in. And this could be different things. You could have multiple unfair advantages, multiple things that you're good at, multiple things that you're interested in. So you should be able to come up with a lot of ideas. And each of these ideas need to serve a very specific customer, right? Don't leave it to guess, right? You need to make sure that like whatever idea that you're coming up with, it has a customer avatar attached to it. And then lastly, make sure that each of the business ideas that you come up with serve both an emotional and a functional need. And once you've made a list of 10, then closely take a look at that long list that you've made, right? And select the top 3 that are easiest for you to come up with. Top 3 that you think, you believe that right now in this moment with what you already have, you could possibly at least make the initiative to begin actually executing. And that is exactly what we're going to be talking about on our 3rd and last episode in this series. We're going to be talking about how you can actually now take these 3 ideas that you have and actually execute and launch one of them in just 1 week, because that's how long it takes to launch your business idea once you have the right one. All you need is the framework that I'm going to share with you in the next video, so be sure to catch it. But other than that, do not forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Let me know down below if this was useful to you. Let me know if there's something that you heard but really would like me to go deeper into, and let me know if you have more questions that you'd like me to dive in future episodes. But thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one. Bye.